Shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Sachs from the Chai Center, and welcome to the Chai Academy, where we discuss different Jewish topics of interest. So, as this week we began Genesis, we began the Torah anew. We are studying. We began yesterday as an intro, and we're studying Genesis, chapter 1. Verse 1, and we are going to go through the story of Genesis. Now, we mentioned yesterday that the Torah is not written as a storybook. The Torah is not written as a history book. The Torah is to teach us lessons in life. So every story, and it may seem benign, but they're not. They each have a very important lesson in life. And Genesis 1, creation, is no different. And we discussed yesterday that when a person reads the Torah as God's word, then you're filled with reverence. If you read it just as a storybook, an Edgar Allan Poe, or a book of literature, or a history book, then the reverence is not there. It's just interest, and interest is could be shallow. So we are going to go through the 7 days of creation, the 6 plus 1, and we're going to try and analyze and give you perspective of what is going on. And we studied yesterday that the term that uses for God is Elohim, which is the God of justice. And that's how God wanted the world to be judged with justice, tit for tat. However, it could not work that way. So God added, when he created man, he added God mercy. He added mercy into the mix. So justice was tempered with mercy. A phenomenal lesson for us. We cannot be our judge and jury of our kids, our family, etc. We must always temper it with mercy. If you're going to go around your family or your life and your business or your colleagues and peers and family members, you're going to view them as just with justice, you're going to find fault. You're going to find fault with your spouse. You're going to find fault with your kids. You're going to find fault with your coworkers, etc. But if you have compassion and mercy, then it's going to be a whole different ballgame. If every time your child does something wrong, you get a call from a teacher and you blow your top, eventually your top blown is not going to mean anything. You have to, if you have mercy, you're going to say, okay, what is wrong here? What's bothering this child that is bothering the class? So that's the lesson of mercy, is that we can't just be judge, jury, and executioner. And even a judge has to have mercy. So we're going to begin. It's funny, we're going to begin. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And we said yesterday that when it says the heaven and the earth, that the heaven and all its ramifications, the earth and all its ramifications, God created everything on that day. Creationism took a millisecond. And it was over the next 6 days. God suspended them, hung them, placed them in wherever they should be so they could function properly and independently. As we know, that if everything has to have its unique, every human being was created with its unique reason for living. God doesn't create redundancy. No human being is placed as a backup to someone else. And if a person feels that they're redundant, or if a person feels that they're not getting enough space to shine, to be their own, it's a cause of unhappiness. So God created everything, but then it was very important to God over the next 6 days to really separate them, give them their place. The sun by day, the moon at night, etc. And grass grows, but grass does not grow where water is. And water is there to help the grass grow, but not too much of it to inundate it, etc. So God set up the parameters of nature. Nature is godliness. It is absolutely godliness. Nature is not something that is separate from God. Nature is godliness. However, it's godliness that we look at nature and we say, this is nature. So nature actually conceals godliness, but nature, we're taught in the Kabbalah, is godliness. It is exactly the same thing. Nature and God are synonymous. So it is synonymous with God. So it's just that what nature does is kind of, you get used to it. So this is natural. This is not natural. This is supernatural. And as soon as you see something that's supernatural, you say God, God. But the reality is, everything is God. Even nature is God. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the next verse is, and the earth was tohu vavohu, was null and void. So there was nothing. There was nothing functioning. There was nothing happening in the world. As we said, it was all just one ball of nonsense, and there was absolutely nothingness. The world was uninhabitable, and there was nothing could survive. And it's interesting, the Kabbalah says that before God created this world, this universe that we're in now, he created a world called Tohu. The world was Tohu. The world was null and void. Is that before he created this world, he created an only a spiritual world. No physicality. Right? And God said, well, what's the point? What's the point? To create a world where everything's spiritual, to create a world where God just has yes men, and everything is just an extension of God, and they feel they're extension of God, and they're nullified in God's existence. God said, what's the point? So he changed course, and he created a physical world where us human beings could feel independent, but still have the ability to recognize God, and still have the understanding that though we may feel independent, we're ultimately not independent of God. So that is this world. This world is, God is hidden by nature, and our job is to reveal godliness in this world. That it's not. The nature is a godly phenomenon. I'll give you an example that the Kabbalah talks about quite often. He says you take a seed and you plant it in the earth, and it's only the seed when it rots and it decomposes does it stimulate the earth to start growing, to start forcing something from this seed and a sort of like a big bang occurs beneath the ground, and out you get green beans or soybeans or potatoes, etc. So it's only once so you plant the seed, nothing happens. The seed, the seeds are just decompose, and then when it's decomposed, do we have this kind of this miracle that occurs, and a little bit of water, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of air, and a little bit of earth. Does it grow? So so we can say, that's just nature, or we could say, wow, that's powerful, that's incredible. What just happened here? And then we could take a look at this seed, and we can say, wow, this orange seed, which is like a very light brown. It's a tan colored seed, and we place it in the earth, and it rots. And from this tan seed comes a trunk that's the same color as the seed, but then it's covered with a dark bark. And then it has green leaves, and then green fruit, and eventually the green fruit turns orange. And the orange itself, it has little compartments with a very, very thin white layer that separates one wedge from another so that it remains juicy and doesn't dry out. All this is done from this little orange seed. So you take the beginning, the seed, and you take the earth and put it together, you have something dramatically different. Incredible. Right? But that's the DNA. DNA is godly. Likewise, we take the sperm and an egg, and look what happens. It's godly. So nature is godly. And God wanted a world where we, as the human beings, could recognize this. So it was null and void, and God said, okay, I'm now going to begin extrapolating. And what did God do? He created light, and to the light he called day. And he created darkness, and the darkness he called night. Now, darkness is not just the absence of light. But if you have any questions in the interim as we go along, you can feel free to ask, to comment. It's pretty, it's constructive when when there is some involvement. But it can be a lecture as well. I will answer when I can, etc. Also, feel free to say hi. So the darkness is not just an absence of light. Darkness was a conscious creation by God. That you have something called light, and you have something called darkness. Because if God didn't create darkness, and then when God created light, and then God took away the light, it wouldn't necessarily be darkness. It would be something else. Now, what's interesting is that it says God created light and God created darkness, and God called the light day and he called the dark night, and it was one day. So time, this is the beginning of time. Now God existed pre-time. Time is just a creation of God, right? So God was always there. So Reb Saadia Gaon, Reb Saadia, he lived, I think, the 16th century, I believe, 15th century. But he says that it's interesting to note that this is when time first came about, when he created light and darkness, and you finally have a day. A day is time. And the argument, well, why didn't God create the world 6 billion years before? Because there was no 6 billion years before. God created time. Right? There was no before or after when it was just God. It's only after you create time is there time. And he says something else interesting. He says that the very first mitzvah, commandment, given in the Torah was time. Know when the month is. Know when there's a new moon, that means it's beginning of the month. When the moon fully waxes, and that's the middle of the month. And then when it disappears, that's the end of the month. And then it's a new moon again, beginning of the month. That is time. And we know the moon has a 29-day, 12-hour and 14-minute cycle. That's the moon. So we know that's time. That's time. So in a Hebrew lunar calendar, there's 355 days and a few minutes. And the solar calendar, it's different. It's 365 days. But the very first mitzvah given to in the Torah, which Torah is all about, a book of mitzvahs, was time. Because the very first thing God did was time. So if we're a micro of the macro, if the human being is a micro and God is the macro, God's first accomplishment was time. Our first mitzvah was time. Set a time. So we know that when it's a full moon, it's the 15th of the month. We know Passover is the 15th of the month. We know Sukkot, the holiday, is the 15th of the month. And if we know when the new moon is, which day is the first day of the month, so we know 10 days later in a certain month is Yom Kippur, the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Tishrei. So it's all about timing and time calculations, etc. So he says that there's a parallel here. Now, a question is asked. So the first day God created light. God created darkness. And we know light is called day, darkness is night. And it was Yom Echad, it was the first day. But if we just jump forward to the fourth day, it says that God created the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the heavenly hosts. So, what was the first day? If it was only the fourth day that God created the sun, what happened on the first day? What was that light? What was that light? Now, there's different discussions, and by the way, the science has had a crack at it, and the rabbis have had a crack at it, and Christian apologists have had a crack at it. So I think my job is not to tell you what Christian apologists have, but rather Jewish sources. So there's this great discussion, and the discussion is in the Talmud, by the way. The Talmud, which is a couple of thousand years old, there's actually a debate in the Talmud. So there's a Rebbe Eliezer, right? He said that the first day was not, from the first day and to the fourth day, it wasn't sunlight. It was a different type of light. It was a different type of light. It had nothing to do with the sun. And it was a light that God caused to light until he made the sun. So the first 4 days, there was this light. But it had nothing to do with the sun. The sages disagreed with Rabbi Eliezer, and they said, of course it had to do with the sun. But the sun wasn't hung in this orb, this fireball was not hung it's suspended in the sky yet. But it shone, and it was a source of light, and it was a source of life. As we know, that's what the sun is, that the sun and creation of the world came together. So once again, Rebbe Eliezer says, no, it was a completely different light. What happened to this light? So Rashi quotes this debate, and Rashi, the great commentator Rashi, says that God actually let this light shine for a week. And then after this light, this spiritual light, shone for a week, God hid it for the utopian era. God hid it for a special time when he could bring it out, where human beings could benefit from this uber strong light and warmth. Right now, if you brought it out, we possibly couldn't exist, because it would be too hot, it would be too warm, it would be too bright, and vegetation would die, etc. But for the first week, until the sin of Adam and Eve, it shone, and then God hid it. The sages say, yeah, it was sun. It was the first day. It was sun. It was the sunlight, just not hung in the sky. Right? The the Malbim, who lived, I think, in the 18th century, he says that the sun orb for the first few days, right? God put it in the sky, but He didn't give it the light yet, and because He didn't give it the light, so while it moved around for the first 4 days, and the stars moved and the moon moved, etc., everything went from east to west, right? It wasn't light, and the light was separate from the sun. There was light. It was eventually going to be placed in the sun orb, but for the first few days it was not. And so you could tell the difference between light and darkness, because light did end, but you couldn't tell it by the sun. It was only on the fourth day the sun was energized, and likewise the moon. It's interesting that the Malbim, who lived in the 18th century, right? He understood. By the way, he understood that the concept that the sun, that the moon receives the light from the sun, and the stars receive the light from the sun, and well, the planets receive their light from the sun, and he understood it. Which I find very interesting. Reb Joseph Cairo, he has a completely different take, and he says that the light that God created had nothing to do with the sun, like Rebbe Eliezer. He says that and the firmament, the atmospheric ring, right? The ozone layer was so thick that sunlight couldn't get through, which actually some scientists agree with this. They say that the sun could not get through to the earth, and it took a while for the sun to penetrate the earth. But so he says that it had nothing to do with the sun orb, but it was a light that was blocked. It was blocked by the firmament. And because it was blocked by the firmament, there was day and there was night, but it was blocked, so you couldn't really tell when was day, when was night, even though there was, but you couldn't tell there was day or night until the fourth day, when it became abundantly clear, because God placed it in the sun. God placed it in the sun orb, and hung the sun orb in the sky, so now everybody could tell what was day and what was night. I'll tell you, interestingly, is that God called the day, that God called the light a day and the night darkness. So when God created the world, which is around this time of year, right, mid-September, towards the end of September, it's somewhere, it's actually the Vernox. This time of year, right, is we have a 12-hour day and we have a 12-hour night, so it's pretty equal. And so chances are, when God created the world, it was 12-hour day and 12-hour night, until things shifted, and as what happens in the wintertime, and then we get less daylight, and the summertime we get more daylight. But when God created the world, it was a perfect day, and it was a perfect night. So each hour had 60 minutes, and there were 12 hours of daylight. Each hour had 60 minutes, and there was 12 hours of nighttime. So it wasn't a short day or a truncated night. It was perfect. But Rashi does say that this light that God did create in the beginning, God has put away, and He will use it to benefit the righteous. People that are worthy will get this dosage of light and warmth, and it will be extremely physically or spiritually healthy. It's not really clear, and it would be an incredible benefit, and it will be used as a reward. But right now, what we got is what we got. We have the sun. The sun is behind. The sun is behind a shield. The sun is not shining with all its intensity, both in light and in warmth. that there is some type of a shield over the sun, and God will reveal true light, or a superior light, and a superior warmth to those that deserve it in the future. That's what Rashi says. So the the Gur Aryeh, who's who's another commentary, right? So he says once again that this light lasted for a few days, and once the sin happened, it still lasted until the complete week was over. Once Shabbat was over, this light then retreated, and all we are left with is the sunlight. So according to the Gur Aryeh, that there was this light for the first 4 days, and there was just this light for the first 4 days, and then come Wednesday, there was two lights. There was this light and the sunlight, and that was true of Thursday, Friday, and Shabbat, Saturday. And when Saturday the sun set, this light also dissipated, and God has it in storage until until the time where He'll take it out of when he will deem necessary. So here's the bottom line. I mean, once again, this is a huge debate, and you can, I'm sure you can Google it. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff on it on Google about this concept of the first light and etc. Some people use the fact. Some people say, Jewish scholars, scientists, I believe this is Genesis and the Big Bang by Dr. Gerald Schroeder. I believe he uses this to help him navigate these choppy waters. He says that because there was not the sun until the fourth day, so it's very hard to know what was a day and what was a night for the first 4 days. So he posits that perhaps the first 4 days were not 24 hours. Now that's what he posits. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, says that if God called it a day and a night, it was 24 hours. But Dr. Schroeder said that perhaps the first full 3 days could have been millions of years until we got to the fourth day. That's in his book Genesis and the Big Bang. And the reason why he posits this is because creation, we're counted 5,781 from when God created the world. But if you take a look at the world seems a lot older. In fact, if you do carbon dating and you do other types of dating, it seems like the world is much older. And scientists say it's this is dated millions of years and this is dated millions of years. So Dr. Schroeder tries to somehow get Genesis and the scientists aligned on the same page. Not everybody agrees with him. As I said, the Rebbe doesn't agree with him. So what they do is that they explain it that God did not create a new world. When God created Adam and Eve, Adam wasn't a baby. Adam wasn't a sperm and an egg. Eve wasn't a sperm and an egg. Adam and Eve were fully grown, maturated adults. They ate from the fruit of the tree. These trees weren't new. They already bore fruit. They already had rings on them. They were able to shave the sheep's wool. Wasn't just a sheep and as a concept. It was sheep, full grown sheep, and on and on and on. I mean, they could milk the cow. It wasn't a calf that didn't have milk. It was a cow that was already producing milk, etc. So that's more of is that God did not create a new world. God created a world that was already completely functional, so the human being does not have to wait for anything. We're taught that Adam and Eve had sex on the first day. Now, if you're a sperm and an egg, or you're a 1 day old baby, you're not having sex on the first day. It's only when you're able to have sex, when you reach puberty, and who knows when puberty was then. Anyway, so so that's how others explain it. That the world, the first day was 24 hours, the second day was 24 hours, the third day was 24 hours, the fourth day was 24 hours. Dr. Schroeder and others say that perhaps it was not the case. The answer to that is teku, which means it's unclear. It's unclear what the truth is, and there's no reason, by the way, they have to be mutually exclusive of one another. They both could be right. They both could be wrong. It's just an interesting topic for conversation. We will continue more about the age of the world, etc., as we progress through Genesis and creation. If there are any questions, now's a good time to ask. If not, you can always leave a question here, and or rabbi@thehighcenter.com. If you would like to see other courses, or you like to review this course, you can find it at thehighcenter.com/academy. Be well.